guys, what's up? It's BigJackFilms here, and welcome back to the King Kong review. Oh, you're probably wondering what this is all about and where I've been for the past few months. Well, there was a incident in Toronto. Many people injured. A few people died. Doctor's orders were not very good. And I think a plane crashed in the streets. I can never go back to that life. But I'm back again, and here to bring you another set of reviews. Well, since I covered the majority of the history of Kong through films, television, video games, and all forms of media, I figured now would be a good opportunity to talk about something that most reviewers pass on, the fan films. Now, I know it seems redundant to talk about fan films since it seems like a cheap shot to critique low-budget independent films, but in recent years, fan films have started to become as popular, if not better, than most recent blockbusters. Hell, some of them have slipped into controversy and even legal issues. However, big-budget fan films based on King Kong are not very common. Most of these films are on very low budgets, if not any at all. However, the main theme on covering these films is the inspiration. The original King Kong was a landmark in cinema that reached for the impossible and did something extraordinary by pushing the boundaries of filmmaking and special effects, and with it came the recognition of being one of the most influential films of all time, igniting the spark of many filmmaking minds from Ray Harryhausen, Steven Spielberg, Phil Tippett, John Landis, Rick Baker, Jordan Vogt Roberts, and of course Peter Jackson, all of which in one form or another made their first films based on, if not inspired by, King Kong. However, through those early days of film, digital technology was far off in the future. So how the hell would young filmmakers be able to recreate the eighth wonder? Well, the only if not affordable way was through the realm of the Super 8mm film camera. Now, before talking about the films, I should explain this particular format. 8mm film was a much smaller version of 35mm film, which is used for major motion pictures. It was a novelty for many families and public events to be able to film their own lives, and was the start of the home movie formula. Instead of pressing a record button to get instant results, you either had to hand crank or wind up the camera in order to film shots, sort of like how Carl Denham did in his movies. Also, the majority of home movies back then were silent, since sound was another process unto itself. This format was also before the days of DVD and VHS, and many movies for home video were sold as either full films on 16mm or as digest abridged films on Super 8. And many of the King Kong movies were also sold in this format. Once kids started to take an interest in the format, it was the first steps for many young and future filmmakers, and for some, King Kong seemed like the perfect choice to remake in this style. Now, many of these first few films are relatively short, since most Super 8 reels at the time only had a total of 5 minutes of record time, so I figured I'd tackle the shorter films in a compilation review. Let's start things off with a King Kong test film by Lerner Home Movies. It's a simple recreation of the iconic finale where Kong climbs the Empire State Building and fights the incoming planes. The stop-motion animation may be crude, but that's really due to the puppet's limitations. It was created by using the King Kong Aurora model kit, which for monster fans was a popular piece of merchandise. However, Michael Lerner, the director behind this film, simply took the kit apart and modified it to have more movement. I also gotta credit Michael for his Empire State Building model, and the clever background of the New York skyline using a large poster. All in all, while the animation is a little jerky as a test,
successful test.
Overall, not bad for a first try. The next film in this compilation is a little short titled Little Kong. Released in 1977, it's more of a skit recreation than an actual film, recreating the scene where Kong recaptures Anne from the hotel in the original. There's not much known about this microfilm, especially since it's foreign and I can't understand what they're saying. But for Michael Chatelain, it's not a bad attempt, and the stop motion is kind of adorable. And while we're on the subject, it turns out there were a couple of foreign King Kong fan films made on the Super 8 film as well. One of which I was able to translate is called Graze in the Land of King Kong from 1979. Made in Portuguese, this film starts off with the natives crucifying Kong? Well, that's an interesting take on the story. While it's hard to translate the language, the film oddly enough is more of a demonstration on stop-motion animation, and from what I've guessed, the director, Kairo Motoso, is making clay stop-motion dinosaurs for the film, and for our first glance, the puppets look pretty impressive. And as his daughters fall asleep, we see the prehistoric land come to life in their dreams, while also encountering the giant ape Kong in the flesh. Or, in this case, clay and plasticine. For a short film made in the 70s in Portuguese, I gotta admit, it's pretty impressive. Sure, the animation is choppy, but the sets and environments are pretty wide open and deliver some great scenery. We also get to see some small snippet fights with Kong battling the T-Rex, giant snake, and even a Triceratops out of the novelization and Universal's 1975 script. Also, the music is a nice touch to the scene and reminds me of John Barry's score to 76. All in all, it's crude and choppy, but pretty impressive. Another Portuguese film that same year was King Kong by Pedro Flexa on YouTube. It's a simple 3-minute remake of the story, but to abridge it, there were some slight changes. For one thing, King Kong just grabs the girl from her bedroom and her boyfriend, I guess, travels through the Greenwoods to save her from the prehistoric environment. If you strip away the story piece by piece, it's gonna be a mess. But again, this was a passable effort for the young filmmakers here. For one thing, it uses some impressive camera tricks to pull off the girl in Kong's hand, using a fur glove and forced perspective, and I'm guessing their mom's fur coat for when the girl is in close-ups of Kong's hand. This was also the first of many Super 8 films to utilize the Revell Endangered Gorilla Model Kit in the stop motion to achieve the likeness of Kong. Overall, it's creative, but nothing special. Next up is another series of test films by Anthony Krenkovich from 1979 to 1980, recreating the Empire State Building scene from the original Kong. The first attempt in 1979 was using a clay Kong atop a 2D cardboard cone of the building. He also did attempt to recreate the swamp scene with the Brontosaurus, as well as test out his T-Rex puppet. It seems Anthony put a lot of thought into this for a possible full-fledged remake. Unfortunately, a lot of the footage is pretty rough to view, and the majority of it is out of focus. So while the animation is much smoother, it's kind of hard to watch. In 1980, Anthony tried to recreate the climax of the original film again, and this time the results were a lot better. Filtered in black and white and completely in focus, this recreation is pretty damn impressive. The Kong puppet is a spitting image of the original's design, the Empire set is much more alive, and even Anne and the pilots are wonderfully sculpted in claymation. Hell, for some of the wide shots of the planes, he did his own hand-drawn animation. Again, pretty impressive stuff from 1980. While the first test was kind of a dud, this one is much more impressive. In short, I'll let stop-motion animator Randy Cook sum it up.
The analogy is like telling an actor that he's got to get it on take one. Maybe we've got enough for take two, but we're using take one or take two, and that's pretty much what it was like in stop motion.
In the 1980s, another Super 8 filmmaker, Wallace Jones, did a short recreation of the third act of Kong titled Kong's Final Challenge, in which the giant ape is displayed at a Broadway theater, escapes, and climbs the Empire State Building with his bride. The biggest stepping stone compared to the other films is the stop motion. The Kong puppet is very well sculpted, and the sets are really nice as well. A lot of it seems like either large photos, painted backgrounds, or even rear screen projection. There's honestly not much to say about this one. It's a nice silent short with some smooth stop-motion photography. Now I know I've technically discussed this in my Kong 96 review, but considering we're on the subject of Super 8 films, I might as well give a bit more insight on this cancelled production. In 1973, after watching the original King Kong on TV and gaining a ton of early learning experience from Forrest Ackerman's famous Monsters of Filmland and the works of Ray Harryhausen, 12-year-old Peter Jackson decided he was going to remake King Kong on Super 8 film. Excited by his imagination and ambition, the first thing he created was a little stop-motion puppet of Kong with wire joints and his mother's fur coat, which that alone must have been a little ordeal with his parents. The first scene he was gonna get in the can was, of course, the Empire State Building, for which was the first thing he created in the animatic for the final 2005 film before the script was finished. He built the Empire State Building out of cardboard, glue, and Scotch tape, and the results are honestly really solid for a New Zealand filmmaker at the time.
I didn't even bother painting the back of it because I thought we'd only be filming it from the front, so I conserved your resources. Yeah, I conserved my silver paint, must have been in short supply.
He then built a prehistoric set by painting a valley canopy over an old sheet, while also adding miniature trees and shrubbery on the table. He even went as far as to sculpt the Ceratopian dinosaur out of clay and latex, which again, much like the Kong puppet, is pretty damn good. From what I've heard, he wanted to include his local friends to be casted in the film since they worked with him on his early World War II shorts. While he never built an airplane for the Empire State Building set and did some test shooting of Kong moving around, Jackson unfortunately felt the project was a little too overambitious and eventually gave up on it. But in his absence, he created other stop-motion projects, including the short film The Valley, which was a tribute to stop-motion master Ray Harryhausen's mythological films. While creating the short for a school filmmaking competition, you could see where the groundwork was for the Super 8 Kong film that could have been. So, all in all, these Super 8 films aren't half bad. However, we're not done with the Super 8 genre just yet. Check in for part 2, and we'll be taking a look at a few more high-quality shorts, so we'll see you next time.